Hello Booktube, this is Jenny and I'm here today to do the Booktuber Newbie Tag. I wanted to talk just a little bit about why my channel is more of a mixture. So while I am going to do a lot of book videos, I'm also going to do studio vlog videos, and you can see some of those that have already been uploaded. And it's just kind of a mixture of those things because that's who I am. And as we'll see as we go through the questions for the Booktuber Newbie Tag, that's kind of part and parcel of why I wanted to start the channel in the first place. So the first question being, why did you want to start this channel? I answer a little bit of that in my welcome video, but I do love reading. I love books, and I love the community that Booktube is. There is room, it feels like there's room for everyone to have their own perspective on different books, and so I wanted to join in with that aspect. And I also wanted to share my art process through this venue and through this medium, and also as a creative person, I really love the creativity and editing of making videos as well. I'm very much in the beginner stages of learning how to do that, but I find it a very enriching and interesting new kind of pastime for myself to pursue. What are some fun and unique things that I can bring to Booktube? Well, I think that I do read quite a mixture of types of books and genres, and I think that is something that is appealing to people, is that different types of people read different types of things and have different perspectives on those genres. So I wouldn't say that my eclectic nature in reading is that different. There's many booktubers that I think have really eclectic and interesting taste in reading on Booktube. But I think I bring kind of artistic sensibility, so coming from as being an artist myself, I tend towards books about artists and find explorations of the art world very interesting in fiction and in nonfiction. And then just my perspective in terms of being from the part of the world I'm from the west coast of Canada. What am I most excited about with the new channel? I'm excited about a lot of different aspects. I'm excited about connecting with people. I'm excited about contributing something to a community that I find really, that I get a lot from. And I'm excited about making videos and exploring that as a creative medium. Why do I love reading? That is a very probably long-winded answer, but I feel that reading is just a part of my identity as a person, and it has been for most of my life. It's probably one of the core parts of myself that I have always had. So you know how some hobbies and interests kind of come to you at different times in your life? Reading has always been there, and it's always stayed with me through everything that I've gone through in my life, through all the changes. I've always consistently been a reader, and I love it because you have the ability to share so many perspectives and see parts of the world and understand different people's point of view in ways that you just couldn't, having only one life on this planet, experience otherwise. You can, of course, experience them through film and television, but reading is a very different medium in that way because it is very internalized, and as an introvert, I feel like it's very personal to me. And another part of Booktube that's exciting to me is that I may get to share those internal parts of reading with others in a more collaborative way, so that's also really interesting to me. What book or series got you into reading? I don't remember anything specific. I got into reading because it was a habit that my mom had. She's a very voracious reader. Every night before she goes to sleep, she reads, and I would see her doing that, and that just seemed like what I was supposed to do. So I did that. One of the first books I remember reading, novels I remember reading, is Charlotte's Web, and I think that was in 3rd grade. So I was very impacted by a lot of the literature that we were asked to read in school. I have really strong memories of reading Charlotte's Web, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Great Gatsby, Of Mice and Men. So a lot of books like that have stayed with me. I would say when I was in my early, so about between 10 and into my teens, I read fiction that was a bit more, fluffy, you could say, perhaps. So things like Sweet Valley High, the Sweet Valley High series, and Danielle Steele books, which I think were in some cases, she wasn't a bad writer by any means. I think she is a great writer in some ways. But I think for me, the romance genre and the repetition of the structure got a bit brutal for me, because I started reading Danielle Steele and then I was just reading everything she wrote. And then eventually, and this is after reading dozens of her books, I started to get a little bit bored. So I haven't really read any romance much over the last 20 years, but it definitely got me into reading, and it got me into, I also always wanted a strong female lead, so that's a really strong component in most of the books that I read, is a strong female lead, and it's continued throughout my reading history. What questions would you ask your favorite booktubers? I don't know if I have any specific questions for favorite booktubers. I really appreciate the content that booktubers create. I have many favorites, and I think that there is so much variety on what booktubers make, but my favorite booktubers tend to be booktubers with a very strong point of view and a very strong personality that comes across in their videos. They don't necessarily have to read the books that I like to read. It's more about their aura and a feeling of authenticity that I get from them when I'm watching their channels. What challenges will be the hardest to overcome? Well, it's definitely a learning curve. Making videos is a learning curve, and so I think that, in a few years I will probably look back on these early videos and cringe a little bit at the techniques and the process of learning. But I really took a lot of the booktuber advice whenever they make videos about starting your own channel to heart, and thought, I'm just gonna start. I know it's not gonna be perfect, and I know that they're not gonna look as great as a lot of the other videos that a lot of booktubers do that I love so much, but I have to start somewhere, and I'm just gonna start here. And not being a perfectionist, I am someone that can deal with a little bit of imperfection in myself and in others, and I don't care if everything is exactly perfect, because I just don't think that's actually possible to attain anyway. When did you start reading? I have memories of memorizing words in grade 1. So I was memorizing what words looked like and reading that way. And that is really much how my brain is. I do have like a kind of a photographic memory, so when I see something and when I write something, that's when I actually retain it. So that was when I started. So I would probably have been 6 years old or 7 years old. Where do I read? I read mostly in bed before I go to sleep at night. But I will also read in whatever scenario where I can. So if my children are at a swimming class, I'll read while I'm waiting for them. I just finished a book the other day while I was waiting for the car to be repaired in the shop. I will, one of my favorite times to read is on a Sunday morning when we don't have to be anywhere, and I can have a cup of tea and sit in the rocking chair downstairs and read a few chapters of a book. So I would say the largest part of my reading is done in the evenings before bed. And then it also depends if I'm reading nonfiction, if I'm doing research, because I do a bit of freelance writing, and I do research for my artwork. So if I'm doing research, I tend to do that during the daytime, because I like to write notes, and obviously laying in bed is not a great time to write notes. And what kind of books do I like to read? Okay, so I have a pretty eclectic taste. I would say I read, most of it is fiction. I really like historical fiction. And I would say I am trying to diversify my reading as well. So I'm trying to read more perspectives from different countries, and more perspectives from different types of writers than I usually gravitate towards. The nonfiction I read usually has to be very specific to any type of research I'm doing. If I'm reading nonfiction and it's not something specific that I want to learn about, I tend to get a little bit bored and I don't necessarily finish the book. I might skim it. So for me, nonfiction has to relate very closely to something that I'm really interested in. I love memoir though, so memoir is probably one of my favorite genres of nonfiction, that also though has to be related to something that I really, really love. So Carol Drinkwater's series, for example, The Olive Farm, which are set in the south of France near Cannes, where she has a olive farm with her husband. I love those books, and I really love like very personal first-person narratives when they are done well. So I've read a bit of fantasy in my life. I do read some fantasy. I do read poetry. I'm not huge into genre fiction, so crime and mystery I tend to not read very much. YA I don't usually read on my own. If I'm going to read YA or middle grade, it's usually because it's relating to books that my son, who's now 10, is going to be reading, or I'm reading with my children, so we'll read together as well. I can be persuaded to read YA, and I do have a couple series of them, but it is not, I like complex character development and complex plot lines, and I tend to get a little bit bored if it's YA and it's kind of watered down for a younger audience, if that makes sense. And I know there are some wonderful YA books out there that are not watered down in any way, but that's just my tendency. I do read art books as well, and by art books I don't mean instructional art books, but more books about artists, biography. I usually try to read 1 or 2 biographies a year, or autobiographies, but they're usually biographies. And I'll talk more about my specific reading goals for this year in a future video. But I think that's it for this tag. So thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to chatting with you in the comments and getting to know you. And I also look forward to making more videos, sharing more specifics about the books I'm reading right now. So have a great rest of your day.